Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and realizing that half of your life is already behind you, and that the years ahead are fewer than the years you have already lived. Most people avoid thinking about this because it feels uncomfortable. Yet Marcus Aurelius insisted on confronting this reality again and again. He believed that the most dangerous illusion a human being can fall into is the quiet assumption that there will always be more time. If you read his personal writings carefully, you begin to notice something striking. Marcus Aurelius was not trying to inspire himself with comforting thoughts, nor was he attempting to create elegant philosophical reflections for future readers. What he was doing, day after day, was reminding himself of truths that are difficult to accept. He was writing as a man who understood that even an emperor, surrounded by power, wealth, and influence, remains subject to the same relentless law as everyone else. Time moves forward, and it never pauses for anyone. The brutal lesson he returned to more than any other was the realization that life is short, and that most people spend it distracted by things that do not matter. You can see this everywhere in the modern world. People postpone the life they claim to want, telling themselves that they will start later, that they will become disciplined later, that they will take control of their habits later. Yet Marcus Aurelius would likely look at this pattern and ask a simple but uncomfortable question: what exactly are you waiting for? He understood that procrastination is rarely about laziness. More often, it is about the quiet belief that tomorrow will always exist, that there will always be another opportunity to begin again. But the Stoic perspective refuses to indulge that comforting assumption. Marcus reminds himself that every day lost to hesitation is a day that disappears permanently into the past. Once it is gone, it cannot be reclaimed, negotiated, or repeated. This awareness gave his philosophy a certain severity that many modern interpretations soften or ignore. When Marcus Aurelius reflects on time, he does not speak like someone trying to reassure himself. Instead, he speaks like a man determined to shake himself out of complacency. He reminds himself that entire generations of human beings have lived, worried, struggled, and disappeared, leaving behind little more than faint traces in history. The kings, the generals, the wealthy merchants, the celebrated thinkers of their time all believed that their concerns were urgent and significant. Yet now they are remembered, if at all, as distant names in books. When you step back and consider this honestly, something begins to shift in the way you view your own life. The endless anxieties about reputation, status, and comparisons start to look strangely small. The arguments that consume so much emotional energy suddenly appear temporary and trivial. Marcus Aurelius believed that remembering the brevity of life does not make existence bleak. On the contrary, it gives your days a sharper sense of meaning. When you understand that your time is limited, you become less willing to waste it. And yet most people do exactly that. They drift through years in a state of vague distraction, moving from one obligation to another, from one entertainment to the next, rarely stopping to examine whether they are actually living in accordance with their deepest values. Marcus would likely say that the tragedy of human life is not that it ends, but that so many people reach the end without ever having truly lived with intention. To the Stoics, the passage of time was not merely a philosophical observation. It was a call to action. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that the present moment is the only part of life that truly belongs to you. The past is already gone, and the future remains uncertain, which means that the only place where you can exercise your character, your discipline, and your wisdom is the moment you are living right now. This idea sounds simple, but it carries a demanding implication. If the present moment is all you truly possess, then every moment becomes a test of how you choose to live. It becomes a question of whether you will act with integrity or drift into habit, whether you will pursue what is meaningful or surrender to distraction, whether you will cultivate your character or allow circumstances to shape you passively. Marcus Aurelius did not assume that living this way would be easy. In fact, his writings suggest the opposite. He understood that the human mind is naturally drawn toward comfort, approval, and avoidance of difficulty. Left unchecked, these tendencies slowly pull you away from the disciplined life that Stoic philosophy encourages. That is why he constantly reminded himself to return to awareness, to shake off mental laziness, and to confront reality as it is rather than as he wished it to be. What makes his reflections so powerful is the fact that they were written by a man who carried immense responsibilities. Marcus Aurelius was not a detached philosopher living in quiet isolation. He was the ruler of a vast empire, managing political conflicts, military campaigns, and the expectations of millions of people. His days were filled with pressure, uncertainty, and constant demands on his attention. Yet even in the middle of this chaos, he returned again and again to the same fundamental realization. None of this changes the fact that his life, like every human life, was finite. And that realization forced him to ask a question that applies just as much to you today. If your life is limited, what exactly should you be doing with it? The Stoic answer was not about chasing pleasure, accumulating wealth, or seeking admiration. Instead, Marcus believed that the only truly worthwhile goal is the cultivation of character. Everything else, status, recognition, possessions, can vanish in an instant. But the way you choose to think, act, and respond to the world remains within your control as long as you are alive. This is where the first brutal Stoic lesson emerges with full clarity. Life is not waiting for you to get ready. It is unfolding right now, moment by moment, whether you are paying attention or not. Every day that passes is a piece of your life that has already been spent. Marcus Aurelius understood that once you see this clearly, you can no longer pretend that you have endless time to become the person you wanted to be. The only moment available for that transformation is the one you are living now. If the first Stoic realization is that your time is limited, the second realization is even more uncomfortable. It is the discovery that much of what you worry about, plan for, and struggle to manage is never truly within your control. Most people live with the quiet belief that if they think hard enough, plan carefully enough, and work relentlessly enough, they can shape the world exactly as they want it to be. When things go well, this belief feels justified. Success seems to confirm the idea that life can be controlled through effort and intelligence. But Marcus Aurelius saw something different when he observed the world around him. He saw uncertainty everywhere. Empires rose and fell despite careful planning. Generals lost battles they were certain they would win. Good men suffered misfortune, while dishonest men sometimes prospered. Even the most powerful individuals in the Roman world remained vulnerable to illness, betrayal, accidents, and the unpredictable turns of fate. As emperor, Marcus Aurelius had access to more authority than almost anyone alive. Yet if you read his reflections, you quickly notice that he never speaks like a man who believes he controls the course of events. Instead, he constantly reminds himself that the external world moves according to forces far larger than his own will. This insight forms one of the central ideas of Stoic philosophy. There are things that depend on you, and there are things that do not. Your thoughts, your judgments, your decisions, and your actions belong to you. But the reactions of other people, the outcomes of your efforts, and the countless events that shape your environment do not belong to you in the same way. The problem is that most people invert this relationship. They invest enormous emotional energy in trying to control what lies outside their power, while neglecting the one domain that truly belongs to them, their own mind. Think about how often frustration arises from this confusion. You work hard on a project, yet the recognition you hope for never arrives. You treat someone with kindness, but they respond with indifference or hostility. You plan your future carefully, only to see circumstances change in ways you never expected. In each of these moments, the mind instinctively resists reality. It insists that things should have unfolded differently. Marcus Aurelius understood this tendency very well because he saw it in himself. His writings reveal a man who constantly reminded himself not to demand that the world behave according to his personal expectations. Instead, he practiced accepting events as they occurred while focusing his effort on responding to them with clarity and dignity. This approach does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. Stoicism never encouraged people to withdraw from life or abandon their responsibilities. Marcus Aurelius worked tirelessly to fulfill his duties as emperor, making decisions that affected the stability of an entire civilization. But he did so with a clear understanding that the final outcome of events would never be entirely his to command. There is a certain freedom in recognizing this boundary. When you stop demanding control over everything that happens around you, a great deal of unnecessary anxiety begins to dissolve. The mind no longer wastes energy resisting reality or replaying events that cannot be changed. Instead, attention shifts toward the one place where effort can truly make a difference, the quality of your own response. Marcus often returned to the idea that events themselves are not what disturb us. What disturbs us are the judgments we attach to them. A setback becomes unbearable when the mind labels it a catastrophe. Criticism becomes painful when the mind interprets it as a threat to identity. Uncertainty becomes terrifying when the mind insists that the future must unfold in a particular way. But if you pause for a moment and observe carefully, you begin to notice that these reactions arise from interpretation rather than from the events themselves. The external situation may remain exactly the same, yet the emotional experience can change dramatically depending on how the mind chooses to frame it. Marcus Aurelius practiced reminding himself that events are neutral by nature. They simply occur as part of the vast and complex unfolding of the universe. What transforms them into sources of suffering is the story the mind tells about them. When you become aware of this process, you realize that a great deal of your distress comes not from reality itself, but from the resistance you create against it. This is why Stoic discipline places such importance on mastering one's judgments. If you can learn to observe your reactions before immediately accepting them as truth, you gain a surprising degree of psychological freedom. The world may remain unpredictable, and circumstances may continue to change without warning, but your inner stability becomes far less dependent on those changes. Marcus Aurelius did not pretend that this discipline was easy. In fact, his repeated reminders suggest that it required constant effort. The human mind naturally seeks control and certainty, and it resists the idea that many outcomes lie beyond its authority. Yet Marcus believed that the refusal to accept this fact creates far more suffering than the fact itself. When you insist that life must unfold according to your preferences, every unexpected event feels like an injustice. But when you accept that uncertainty is part of the structure of existence, the same events begin to look different. They become challenges to respond to rather than personal attacks against your plans. In this way, Stoic philosophy transforms adversity into an opportunity for character. A difficult situation becomes a chance to practice patience. Criticism becomes an opportunity to examine your ego. Loss becomes a reminder of the impermanent nature of all things. Instead of asking why something happened to you, Marcus encourages a different question. How can you respond to this moment with wisdom? This shift in perspective may sound subtle, but it changes the entire experience of living. Instead of measuring your success by external outcomes that you cannot fully control, you begin measuring it by the integrity of your actions and the clarity of your judgment. The world may still bring disappointment, but it loses the power to dictate your inner state. Marcus Aurelius believed that this distinction between what you control and what you do not control is one of the most important lessons a person can learn. Without it, life becomes a constant struggle against forces that cannot be defeated. With it, the mind becomes calmer, more resilient, and far less vulnerable to the chaos of external circumstances. And this leads directly to another brutal Stoic realization. If you cannot control most of what happens around you, then the world will not arrange itself to make you comfortable. It will not soften its edges to protect your expectations, nor will it pause to accommodate your preferences. Which means the next lesson Marcus Aurelius confronted is one that modern culture often refuses to accept. The world does not owe you comfort. One of the harshest realizations in Stoic philosophy is also one of the simplest. The world was not designed to make you comfortable. It was not arranged to protect your expectations, nor does it adjust itself to match your preferences. Yet much of human frustration begins with the quiet belief that life should somehow cooperate with our desires. Marcus Aurelius saw this tendency clearly, both in himself and in the people around him. Human beings naturally want things to go smoothly. We want plans to unfold exactly as we imagine them. We want other people to behave in ways that feel fair, respectful, and predictable. When these expectations are violated, the mind reacts as if something unjust has occurred, as if the universe has somehow failed to fulfill an obligation. But the Stoic perspective refuses to accept that assumption. It operates according to its own vast and complex order, a network of causes and consequences that extends far beyond the perspective of any individual life. Storms arrive without asking permission, illness appears without explanation, opportunities vanish without warning. None of these events occur because the world is hostile to you personally. They occur because change, uncertainty, and disruption are natural features of existence. When you resist this reality, life begins to feel like a constant battle against circumstances. Every inconvenience feels like an offense. Every difficulty feels like an interruption of how things were supposed to be. The mind becomes trapped in a cycle of resentment, always comparing reality to an imaginary version of how life should have unfolded. Marcus Aurelius believed this mental habit is one of the greatest sources of unnecessary suffering. Instead of demanding that the world behave differently, he encouraged a different approach. Rather than asking why events are happening to you, he suggests asking how you can respond to them in a way that reflects strength of character. The situation itself may not be under your control, but the way you interpret and respond to it remains your responsibility. This shift in perspective transforms the experience of difficulty. What once appeared as an obstacle begins to look like a form of training. Every frustrating interaction becomes an opportunity to practice patience. Every setback becomes an opportunity to exercise resilience. Every unexpected change becomes a reminder that adaptability is one of the most valuable human skills. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the people who create problems in your life are not extraordinary exceptions to the human condition. They are simply behaving according to the same flawed nature that exists within every person. When someone acts selfishly, dishonestly, or aggressively, it can feel personal in the moment. Yet from a Stoic point of view, these behaviors reflect ignorance, insecurity, or misunderstanding rather than deliberate malice directed uniquely at you. By remembering this, Marcus attempted to reduce the emotional intensity of conflict. Instead of reacting with anger or outrage, he encouraged himself to view difficult people with a kind of detached understanding. Human beings make mistakes because they lack wisdom, not because the universe has chosen to test your patience specifically. This does not mean accepting injustice or allowing harmful behavior to continue without resistance. Stoicism never asked people to tolerate wrongdoing passively. What it asked was that resistance be guided by reason rather than by uncontrolled emotion. The goal was not to eliminate action, but to eliminate the emotional turmoil that often accompanies it. Marcus Aurelius understood that anger rarely improves a situation. It clouds judgment, distorts perception, and encourages reactions that create even greater problems. A calm and disciplined mind, on the other hand, can address challenges with far greater clarity. By maintaining control over your emotional state, You preserve the ability to act wisely even in difficult circumstances. This mindset also changes how you approach hardship. Modern culture often treats comfort as the ultimate goal of life. Success is frequently measured by the absence of difficulty, the accumulation of convenience, and the elimination of discomfort. Yet the Stoics viewed this pursuit with suspicion. They believed that a life designed entirely around comfort slowly weakens the human spirit. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that hardship is not necessarily an enemy. In many cases, it is the very environment in which strength develops. Just as physical muscles grow stronger through resistance, character grows stronger through challenge. Without difficulty, patience would remain untested. Without uncertainty, courage would remain unnecessary. Without obstacles, perseverance would never develop. From this perspective, the presence of hardship in life is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that you are living in the same complex and unpredictable world that has shaped every human being who came before you. Instead of asking how to avoid all discomfort, Marcus Aurelius focused on learning how to endure it with dignity. This idea can feel unsettling at first, especially in a world that constantly promises easier paths and faster solutions. Yet the Stoic approach offers a deeper kind of stability. If your peace of mind depends on life being easy, then your peace will always remain fragile. The moment circumstances become difficult, your sense of control disappears. But if your stability comes from the ability to face difficulty calmly, then your inner state becomes far less vulnerable to external change. Marcus Aurelius practiced reminding himself that events themselves cannot harm his character unless he allows them to corrupt his judgment. Illness may weaken the body, and loss may alter the course of life, but the core of who you are remains within the domain of your choices. As long as you retain the ability to think clearly and act with integrity, adversity loses much of its destructive power. This is why Stoic philosophy places so much emphasis on preparation. Marcus encouraged himself to anticipate difficulty rather than pretend it would never arrive. By imagining the challenges that might appear during the day, he reduced the shock when those challenges inevitably occurred. Instead of feeling blindsided by problems, he was mentally ready to confront them. Preparation changes the relationship you have with hardship. What once felt like an unfair surprise becomes something expected and manageable. The mind remains steadier because it no longer interprets difficulty as a violation of how life should be. It simply recognizes it as part of the structure of reality. And once you accept that reality, something interesting happens. You stop wasting energy wishing the world were easier. Instead, you begin focusing on becoming stronger. Marcus Aurelius understood that you cannot control the events that will shape your life. The world will continue to produce uncertainty, conflict, and unexpected change regardless of how much you prefer stability. But within that unpredictable environment, one thing remains available to you at all times. You can decide the kind of person you will be when those challenges appear. And that decision, repeated day after day, is what ultimately shapes the course of a life. There is a difficult idea at the heart of Stoic philosophy, one that many people resist when they first encounter it. The idea is simple, but its implications are profound. Much of the suffering you experience in life does not come directly from events themselves, but from the way your mind interprets those events. Marcus Aurelius returned to this insight repeatedly in his reflections. Whenever he felt disturbed by a situation, he reminded himself to pause and examine what was actually happening. Often, he discovered that the external event was far less troubling than the judgment he had attached to it. This distinction may seem subtle at first, but once you begin to notice it, you see it everywhere. A comment from another person becomes painful only when the mind interprets it as an insult. A setback becomes overwhelming when the mind labels it a failure. Uncertainty becomes frightening when the mind insists that the future must unfold according to a specific plan. The Stoics believed that these judgments happen so quickly that most people never realize. they are making them. The mind reacts automatically, assigning meaning and emotional weight to every experience. Within seconds, a neutral event becomes a story about success or failure, respect or humiliation, security or danger. Marcus Aurelius practiced interrupting this automatic process. Whenever something disturbed him, he tried to step back mentally and observe the event as it truly was, stripped of the dramatic interpretation his mind might want to create. Instead of saying, "This is terrible," he would ask himself, "What has actually happened?" Very often, the answer was surprisingly simple. A person said a few words. A plan did not succeed. An inconvenience occurred. When described plainly, many events lose the power they seemed to hold just moments earlier. The emotional intensity fades because the mind is no longer exaggerating the significance of what happened. This does not mean pretending that difficulties do not exist. The Stoics were not naive about the realities of life. They experienced loss, illness, conflict, and disappointment just like everyone else. What they attempted to change was not the existence of these events, but the way their minds reacted to them. Marcus Aurelius understood that the mind has a powerful tendency to magnify problems. It imagines worst-case scenarios, repeats painful memories, and projects fears into the future. Left unchecked, this mental habit can transform small obstacles into overwhelming burdens. Think about how often this happens in everyday life. A minor mistake becomes the focus of endless self-criticism. A disagreement with someone else turns into hours of replaying the conversation in your head. A single uncertain outcome becomes the starting point for imagining dozens of negative possibilities. In these moments, the mind becomes both the narrator and the amplifier of suffering. It takes a limited event and stretches it across time, replaying it again and again until it feels far larger than it truly is. Marcus Aurelius believed that learning to interrupt this process was essential for maintaining inner stability. Instead of allowing every thought to dictate his emotional state, he practiced observing his thoughts with a degree of distance. When the mind attempted to exaggerate a situation, he reminded himself that the judgment was optional. The event had already occurred, but the interpretation was still under his control. This idea gave him a powerful form of psychological freedom. If the mind is capable of creating unnecessary suffering through interpretation, it is also capable of reducing suffering by changing the way it frames events. By refusing to label every difficulty as a disaster, you weaken the emotional grip those difficulties have over you. Marcus often summarized this idea in a simple observation. The disturbance comes not from the thing itself, but from your opinion about it. Once you truly understand this, a new possibility emerges. Instead of being carried away by every emotional reaction, you begin to examine those reactions before accepting them as truth. The space between an event and your response becomes slightly wider, and within that space you regain the ability to choose. This ability to pause is one of the most powerful skills Stoicism attempts to cultivate. In that brief moment of awareness, you can ask a different question. Instead of reacting automatically, you can ask whether your interpretation of the situation is actually accurate. Is this truly as catastrophic as the mind suggests? Is this problem permanent or merely temporary? Is this event harmful to your character or only inconvenient to your plans? Very often, the answers reveal that the situation is far less threatening than it initially appeared. Marcus Aurelius also understood that the mind is particularly vulnerable to comparison. Human beings constantly measure themselves against others, evaluating their success, status, and recognition in relation to the people around them. This habit can quietly poison the sense of satisfaction in one's own life. When you focus excessively on comparison, even genuine achievements begin to feel inadequate. Someone else always appears more successful, more admired, or more fortunate. The mind then interprets this difference as evidence of personal failure, even when the comparison itself is arbitrary. Marcus tried to free himself from this mental trap by returning his attention to what he could actually control, the quality of his own actions. Instead of asking whether he appeared successful in the eyes of others, he asked whether he was acting with integrity, discipline, and fairness in the situations he faced. This shift in focus transforms the way success is measured. External recognition becomes less important than internal alignment with one's principles. The value of a day is no longer determined by praise or criticism from others, but by whether you lived according to the standards you set for yourself. Over time, this approach builds a form of resilience that is difficult to shake. When your self-evaluation depends primarily on your own actions rather than on external approval, the opinions of others lose much of their power to disturb you. Marcus Aurelius did not expect the mind to become perfectly calm or immune to emotion. He understood that thoughts and feelings rise naturally, often without invitation. The goal of Stoic discipline was not to eliminate emotion entirely, but to prevent emotion from overwhelming reason. By observing your thoughts instead of blindly obeying them, you gradually gain influence over the patterns that shape your inner life. Fear still appears, but it no longer dominates your judgment. Anger still arises, but it passes more quickly because it is not constantly reinforced by new interpretations. What remains is a clearer and steadier mind. And a steady mind possesses a remarkable advantage in an unpredictable world. Because when your greatest struggles no longer come from the stories your mind invents, you begin to see life with greater clarity. The chaos of events remains, but the internal noise that once magnified that chaos begins to fade. Marcus Aurelius believed that this inner discipline was one of the greatest forms of strength a person could develop. A calm mind does not eliminate the difficulties of life, but it allows you to face those difficulties without being crushed by them. And once you learn to manage the voice inside your own mind, another Stoic realization becomes impossible to ignore. Even if you master your thoughts, and even if you live with discipline and clarity, there is one truth about life that no philosophy can remove. One day, your time will come to an end. There is one final lesson in the writings of Marcus Aurelius that many people try to avoid, perhaps because it confronts the most uncomfortable truth about human existence. No matter how carefully you plan your life, no matter how disciplined you become, and no matter how much success you achieve, one day your life will come to an end. Marcus Aurelius did not treat this idea as something dark or morbid. In fact, he returned to it constantly, almost as a daily reminder to himself, not because he was obsessed with death, but because he understood that the awareness of mortality can clarify what truly matters. When you genuinely accept that your time is limited, the way you see your life begins to change. Many of the concerns that dominate your attention start to lose their importance. The arguments that once seemed urgent become trivial. The opinions of strangers begin to matter far less than the quality of your own actions. Marcus often reflected on the countless generations that had lived before him. Entire civilizations had risen, flourished, and disappeared. Powerful rulers once believed their influence would last forever, yet now their names survive only as fragments in historical records. From the perspective of time, even the most impressive human achievements eventually fade. This realization was not meant to diminish the value of life. Instead, it was meant to sharpen it. If everything eventually disappears, then the question becomes simple. What should you do with the limited time that you have been given? Marcus Aurelius believed the answer was not found in wealth, pleasure, or recognition. These things can appear valuable for a moment, but they are fragile and easily lost. A reputation can vanish overnight. Possessions can be taken away. Even physical strength and beauty inevitably fade. What remains meaningful, according to Stoic philosophy, is the development of character. Your ability to act with fairness, patience, courage, and discipline becomes the true measure of a life well lived. These qualities do not depend on external circumstances. They can be practiced in moments of success and in moments of difficulty alike. In fact, it is often during hardship that they become most visible. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every day presents a choice about the kind of person you will be. You may not control the events that shape your day, but you always control how you respond to them. You can react with anger or with patience. You can meet obstacles with resentment or with determination. You can allow frustration to dominate your thoughts, or you can maintain clarity and composure. These small decisions, repeated over time, gradually shape the character of a life. When Marcus reflected on death, he did not see it as a reason for despair. Instead, he saw it as a reason to act with urgency. The knowledge that life is temporary removes the illusion that you can postpone becoming the person you want to be. There is no guarantee that tomorrow will provide the opportunity you ignored today. For this reason, Marcus encouraged himself to treat each day as if it might be his last chance to live with integrity, not in a dramatic or fearful way, but in a practical one. If this were your final day, how would you choose to act? Would you spend it complaining about inconveniences, arguing over trivial matters, or chasing distractions that bring only temporary satisfaction? Or would you focus on acting with honesty, kindness, and discipline? When viewed through this lens, the purpose of life becomes clearer. The goal is not to control everything that happens, nor to eliminate every hardship. Those ambitions are impossible. The true goal is to live each day in a way that reflects the best qualities of your character. Marcus Aurelius also understood that many people waste enormous amounts of time worrying about how they will be remembered after they die. They imagine future generations evaluating their achievements, praising their accomplishments, or preserving their legacy. But Marcus treated this concern with skepticism. He reminded himself that even those who are remembered eventually fade into obscurity. The people who admire you today will themselves disappear, and the people who judge you tomorrow will eventually follow them. In the vast timeline of history, even the greatest reputations are temporary. Once you understand this, a strange form of freedom appears. If fame and recognition cannot last forever, then there is little reason to organize your life around them. Instead of trying to impress an audience that will eventually vanish, you can focus on living in accordance with your own principles. Marcus believed that a good life is measured not by how many people admire you, but by how faithfully you act according to reason and virtue. Did you act with fairness when you had the power to act unjustly? Did you remain calm when circumstances invited anger? Did you fulfill your responsibilities even when no one was watching? These are the questions that matter, and they matter precisely because life is temporary. When you remember that your time is limited, every ordinary moment gains a quiet significance. A conversation becomes an opportunity to practice patience. A challenge becomes an opportunity to demonstrate courage. A disappointment becomes an opportunity to strengthen resilience. In this way, the awareness of mortality does not diminish life. It deepens it. Marcus Aurelius believed that death should be viewed as a natural part of the same process that created life. Just as the seasons change and living things grow and fade, human existence follows the same rhythm. To resist this fact is to struggle against the structure of reality itself. But to accept it is to remove one of the greatest sources of fear. When you no longer treat death as an unspeakable catastrophe, you begin to focus more clearly on how you are living right now. The future becomes less about endless planning and more about meaningful action in the present. This perspective leads to one final Stoic insight. You cannot control how long your life will be, but you can control how you choose to live within it. Marcus Aurelius understood that a short life lived with clarity, discipline, and integrity is far more valuable than a long life spent drifting through distraction and complaint. The true tragedy is not that life eventually ends, but that so many people reach the end without ever having fully committed themselves to living well. And that is why his reflections continue to resonate centuries later. They remind you that time is passing, whether you notice it or not. They remind you that much of the world lies beyond your control. They remind you that your mind can either amplify suffering or reduce it. And they remind you that one day your life will end. But between now and that moment, there is still something entirely within your power. You can choose to live deliberately. You can choose to act with character. You can choose to use the time you have with purpose. And that choice, repeated day after day, is what transforms a human life from something ordinary into something meaningful. If you found something valuable in these reflections, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps this work reach more people who are searching for clarity, discipline, and a calmer way to face life. And if you want to explore these ideas more deeply, I strongly encourage you to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius yourself. The link to the edition used while preparing this video is available in the description. Marcus never intended these writings to become famous. They were simply reminders he wrote to himself while trying to live wisely in a difficult world. And perhaps that is why, nearly 2,000 years later, they still speak to us with such clarity. Thank you for listening.